Hello and welcome to another episode of the Unwanted Opinions podcast. Jay and I are back, and we've got a special guest, Dustin Elliott, aka Dusty Windhorst, friend of the podcast, making his second guest appearance. How are you, Dustin?
Dude, I'm doing pretty good. I'm out here in St. Louis right now for some work training, but I'm ready to talk some basketball again. It's been a minute since I've been on here.
Hell yeah, I'm ready to talk some basketball too. We're gonna ask Dustin a whole series of NBA questions and get his thoughts and see what he likes and doesn't like about the season so far. Jay and I'll chime in from time to time. But as I always say at the beginning of the show, you can subscribe to the Unwanted Opinions podcast wherever you find us, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. You can check us out on our YouTube page, Unwanted Opinions Podcast with Nick and Jay. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Email us, unwantedopinionspodcast@gmail.com. If you got questions, comments, whatever, Jay and I are here.
Dustin came with the heat last time he was on.
Dustin always comes with the heat.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm ready to see what he's bringing tonight. And it's good to not hear us giving our opinions all the time. It's good to hear someone else's. Nick, You had all the topics you wanted to cover. NBA is your baby. So where are we going?
It is. Here? Yeah. Well, I just wanted to start with AD's injury because I think all Lakers fans and LeBron fans, whatever, maybe just NBA fans in general, because if AD's out for the rest of the season, I mean, the Lakers are just basically wiped out of the championship hunt for sure. I think they got good news. They said it was a calf strain, and he just re-aggravated his Achilles tendinosis. The thing that concerns me, though, is I just wanted to get both of your guys' thoughts on it because it almost reminds me of what KD did a few years ago in the playoffs when he had that calf strain, and they weren't really given a lot of details about it. And then obviously you saw in the finals when he popped his Achilles against the Raptors, the first game he came back after about 10 minutes when he just was on fire against the Raptors. And they claimed that it wasn't it had nothing to do with the calf, why he tore his Achilles. But I find that kind of hard to believe because it was in the exact same leg. It was just maybe the timing of it. I don't know. Just to me, it kind of concerns me as a LeBron fan and as I think the Lakers are the title favorites because without AD, they don't have a shot to win the title. I just want to know what you guys think, if you're vaguely worried or what, because I don't know. I'll let you start first, Dustin, and then Jake can follow it up.
For sure. So actually, I wrote down here as well that it's very similar to the Kevin Durant injury. Like you said, initially they were kind of talking about it being a calf injury for Kevin Durant during the finals, and then obviously it ended up being a ruptured Achilles. AD had just missed a few games the other day because of resting his Achilles. And then, like you said, when they had announced that after his MRI that it was just a calf strain, that initially to me was a red flag as well because, like I said, just with referencing it to Kevin Durant, I mean, if that's the case and, they were to go out there just thinking that it's, a mild injury and, they play the Nets tomorrow, if, he were to try to play that game, could something worse happen? Obviously, they've already said he's going to be out for like 2 to 4 weeks anyways. So I personally would like to see them rest him as much as possible. Obviously, as soon as you can get him back out there, that helps the Lakers. I mean, having a defensive anchor like that and then, another scoring piece next to LeBron is huge. One thing I did write down, the Lakers, since adding Anthony Davis last year, are 10-4 when he's not in the lineup. And that's 4-1 this season without him. They just won last night against the Timberwolves without AD. LeBron obviously had to take over a lot of the scoring and, all the other impact that LeBron always has to take on. One thing that makes me worried if he were to miss extended time is obviously LeBron's minutes will go higher than they probably wanted him to go this year. They've been talking a lot this year about how he's been able to finally not play so many minutes, which with him leading the league in most minutes played, and it's by a significant amount. Any rest you can get for a 36-year-old LeBron, regardless of how well he's playing right now, would help, tremendously. With that, though, also being me and you being LeBron fans, I think an extended Anthony Davis loss would help a LeBron MVP campaign.
Definitely.
Obviously, he's already probably at the top of most people's list for an MVP, anyways. But you take away Anthony Davis for a month or two, and if the Lakers can hold on to a top 2-3 seed right now, the number 2 behind the Jazz, they can hold on to a top 2 or so seed. I don't think there's going to be too much of an argument for LeBron not to win MVP unless, there's somebody else. Joel Embiid is playing really well right now. I mean, if he continues to play well and stay healthy, obviously that would play into that. And then you've got some other, few dark horses. I think Damian Lillard can make a case this year. He's playing really well again. Also, one thing I'm trying to see with the loss of AD is going to be which big steps up the most. I think it will probably be Kuzma, with the fact that he'll get more looks now, which last year he even said that people were, kind of critiquing his play and whatnot. And he made the comment, playing behind, two of the top 5 best players in the league. So I'm not getting, the traditional minutes that I'd probably be getting in a different location. If he's the number 1 option somewhere, the number 2 option. So I look to see Kuzma step up. He's been playing really well this year, even with AD in the lineup. He just had 20 and 10 the other night. He's playing big. He's getting a lot of offensive rebounds. So I think he'll play a key role into the Lakers moving forward. And then I think Montrez and Marcus Gasol will have a huge impact as well. I'm interested to see if Markieff Morris finds his way back into the rotation.
He played pretty good against Minnesota last night. I think he was 3 of 4 or 3 of 5 from deep, and he played well. But yeah, I think it's Kuzma and Harrell that really have to step up their scoring. And I actually think you should look for Dennis Schroeder to incorporate himself offensively, just because, like you talked about, LeBron's minutes lows. Schroeder just definitely needs to just carry more of the scoring punch with AD out. They're definitely going to have to win a lot of games, maybe outscoring people with just the presence of losing AD on the floor. But you mentioned LeBron and that MVP, and I definitely think LeBron's chasing that MVP. He wants that 5th one. He wants to tie Jordan because he knows what it means this year. So say he wins his 5th MVP, 5th title, and 5th Finals MVP all in the same season. That's pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, and I think he's still salty about last year.
For sure, he is. He is. That's fueling him.
Yeah, he lost me about $1,000 on that one.
He didn't.
Well,
blame all those writers. Yeah.
You guys nailed a lot of the points. I would be highly concerned if I was a Lakers fan based off of the KD injury. I'm not saying it's the same, but when that happened to Kevin Durant, I don't think anybody really saw that one coming. And the same thing could be happening with Anthony Davis. If I'm the Lakers, I'm taking Dustin's advice and sitting him. If the doctors tell me, if I, on a cautious side, sit him 6 weeks, I'd be sitting him for 10 just to make sure he's good. There's nothing going to happen to him when he comes back, because you can win regular season games. You could finish 4th in the West this year and probably be okay, because you still don't know how big of a home court's going to be without
fans.
Don't know if they're going to have fans there. And on top of that, the Lakers are the number 1 road team in the NBA this year. So I would highly recommend chasing Anthony Davis's health rather than chasing the number 1 or 2 seed and going that route. The Lakers, I think, will be fine. I think we're about to see their depth that me and you have been talking about since for a year and a half now, saying that their depth has been underrated. I think Schroeder definitely needs to step up, like you talked about. I think Harrell's going to have to take the biggest step forward to replace Anthony Davis on offense and defense. I think you know what you're getting in Marc Gasol. He's slow. He's big. He's there kind of to be a big body under the rim. He can put an occasional 3 in the hoop, which is nice. I was sitting there in the shower thinking about this. I don't think there's much of a difference between LeBron playing with Marc Gasol or LeBron playing with Kevin Love. I honestly think Marc Gasol might be a better fit because he's a bigger body down low that you can throw on somebody. He's
definitely a much better defender than Love was.
Yeah, exactly. Neither one of them is going to defend anybody on the wing. He's a bigger body down low. He's a better rebounder than Love was when he was on the Cavs, and he can put in the 3-ball too. So I was thinking that Marc Gasol's probably a better fit than Kevin Love was. Now, if Kevin Love would have been what Kevin Love was coming from Minnesota, maybe it's a different story, like in his prime.
Yeah, that was just a whole different. Obviously, this is down a different road. But I mean, he was one of the classic cases of he was a really good player, but I just think he was a little overvalued because he was a good player on a bad team, putting up a lot of good stats. I mean, you see a lot of those guys every single year, and once clearly he was thrown into the playoffs. I mean, you saw him when he would just get absolute. I think in Game 7 when they won in 2016, I think he had 1 or 2 points.
Yeah,
I mean, he really didn't, and I think he had like 15 rebounds, and that's obviously something. But I've never even thought about it that way. Obviously, Gasol isn't the shooter that Love was, but definitely a much better defender. Even at this stage of his career, when Gasol is really slow, because
he is.
If you watch that game,
like
even
Shrek
if you watch the game last night against the Wolves, I mean, the Lakers were just kind of playing in slow motion, and it was in the fourth quarter. They just took like a burst, and I was like, they should have done this the entire game because they just pulled away from the Wolves, and the Wolves are terrible. I mean, it wasn't much, obviously, an impressive win, but yeah, you rest AD the rest of the regular season for all I'm concerned if you're the Lakers. I mean, if you are even an inch worried that he's going to get hurt before then, all you need him for is the playoffs.
Yep.
That's
and
it.
LeBron can get this team to the playoffs without AD the rest of the regular season. I think this could be a positive, whereas the new guys coming in, you got Schroeder, you got Montrezl Harrell, Marc Gasol, the kind of the guys we just talked about. This gives LeBron more time to play with them and the team to get more minutes on the court so that they have a better chemistry going into the postseason. If I had to challenge somebody, I'd be challenging KCP to get out of the slump he's in because he hasn't been playing up to his the contract extension they gave him, in my opinion, and he's way better than what he's been putting on the court the past few games.
Agreed.
He needs to come out of the slump. And Dustin, like you said earlier, this is Kuzma's time to shine. He's been saying that he believes he's a starter. He showed potential and flashes in games where he looks like he could be an NBA starter and give you 25 points off the bench. And then other nights he goes 2 for 11. And it's like,
right,
you can't have that. So this is his time to step up and shine. He's going to get more minutes now that AD's off the court. Let's see what happens. I don't think the Lakers, to tie this all back to AD, I don't think the Lakers will miss him as bad during the regular season. But without AD in the postseason, they can't win a championship.
I agree. One other thing I had on here, and Nick, you being a big LeBron fan, this is obviously something you've seen over the time. This is honestly one of the first years a LeBron-led team since probably late in Miami where there hasn't been significant amount of drama around trade deadline time of what type of moves are going to get made. The last few years in Cleveland, there was, a lot of talks about, especially when they tried to do the whole Dwayne Wade and Cleveland experience and stuff like that.
I know that was really such a disaster.
The beginning of that year, it was they had Isaiah Thomas, they had Dwayne Wade,
Derrick Rose,
and at points in time there, it seemed like, were they going to figure it out, and they still made it to the finals. This seems like the first year that they're not going to have to, stress around trade deadline time, but I still think that they might still be trying to be a little active at the deadline. I wrote down here, and different people on Twitter and stuff have been talking about how the Lakers, and it's a long shot. I don't even know how possible it is for them to try to go get Beal, Bradley Beal, save him from the Wizards. I don't know how possible that is, but I'm some stuff about if the Cavs were to potentially buy out Andre Drummond or the Pistons were to buy out Blake Griffin. A landing spot for both of them would be LA or could be LA. I don't see either team really just eating that money. They both are getting paid a significant amount of money to, especially with Drummond. I think he's got the most value. Obviously, there's a lot of talks about.
I think definitely Drummond gets traded. Yeah. I think Drummond definitely gets traded because there's teams that definitely want him, and I think the Cavs, especially Dan Gilbert, being the jackass that he is, he's just not going to buy a guy out for no reason. Blake Griffin's another story, and I could actually see Blake going to the Lakers because of what the Clippers did to him, and he was really salty about what the Clippers did to him after he left. So that would be a way to go stick it to the Clippers to go to the other LA team if he wanted to go back to LA, because I just think it's every contract is somewhat tradable in the NBA. I mean, we've seen that. You saw the Russell Westbrook and John Wall swap, but man, that Blake Griffin one is tough. I think he's owed like 80-something million or $60-something million over the next 2 years. Man, that's tough for somebody to try and take. So that one I think is more likely of a buyout. But
how do you like the fit of Blake Griffin?
What's that?
You don't or you do?
How do you like it? I don't know how he would work in LA.
I think if he could buy in and take kind of like the Dwight Howard role from last year and just know that there's going to be playing 10 minutes, 15 minutes a game. There's going to be nights where they want you to play 25 to 30 minutes a game. I think if he comes out there and plays a role where he's getting rebounds, helping move the ball, get 15 points or so off the bench, I think that could help rejuvenate his career right now. We were talking about just a little bit ago, he hasn't dunked in almost 2 seasons. Which is granted, last year the season ended early and they didn't get to go to the bubble. But, the athleticism is definitely taking a hit. But I think part of that, too, is the fact that he's playing in, Detroit. If there was games where, he might put his body on the line more if it was a significant game as opposed to a Tuesday night in Detroit against the Nets or something like that. We're about to get blown out. I mean, you can't really blame him for trying to rest his knees. I mean, Derrick Rose, that was one of the things he was saying with asking for the trade, and now he's on the Knicks. He was telling the coach that he's only got so much miles left on his knees and stuff, and he wants to try to be on a contender, which I don't. Obviously, the Knicks aren't necessarily a contender, but I mean, currently they are the 6th seed in the East. So at least right now
they're a playoff team at least.
Playoff, yeah. And I think they're doing the same thing this year. Are they doing the 10 teams and the play-in game?
Yeah, they're doing the play-in games. Is going to be the 7, 8, 9, and 10 seed are going to be able to fight for those seeds. So, I mean, hey, that means something. If you at least want to go play in the playoffs, I get where Derrick Rose is coming from, and I mean, especially to go be reunited with Tibbs. I saw that every team that Tibbs has ever coached, Rose has played for him.
Yeah, which is wild. I mean, especially because
the Bulls, the Wolves, and now the Knicks.
And then this is his second stint with the Knicks, right?
Yep, it is. Yeah. I think. Yeah, I want to say it was Mike D'Antoni was the coach the first time, but yeah. Anyway, it is his second stint with the Knicks. Yeah,
that's what I thought. But yeah, I mean, if the Lakers. Like I said, it's a long shot for them to probably go get Bradley Beal. I don't even know how possible that is.
I don't think they have the picks. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I think they have to include Schroeder,
Kuzma.
Yeah, Kuzma, Schroeder, KCP. I think they have to add all that to match salaries with the Wizards because I think Beal's owed like $30 million. It'd just be a tough trade to do. And like I said, I just don't think they have to pick ammunition or the young play. I mean, unless the Wizards just really think Kuzma and Alex Caruso are going to be borderline all-star type players. I don't know if I see that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the Nets. So, Dustin, Jay and I have both given we've talked about the Nets briefly on here. We both have reservations about them, to say the least.
Okay.
Obviously, they're just the talk of the NBA really right now. They're one of the best offensive teams that we've ever seen just by the collection of talent that they have. I mean, they really don't run much offense. They just have 3 guys that can go get you a bucket at any point in time. It's just I'm concerned about them defensively. I'm concerned about their mentality as well because you've got 3 guys on that team who have shown to sort of crumble. Not really just under pressure during the game. It's just outside noise really gets to them. I mean, Kyrie, KD, James Harden. So what do you feel about the Nets? Do you feel the Nets are a legitimate title threat?
Yeah, actually, honestly, I do. I think that obviously they've only been together for 17 or so games now with adding Harden, and the 3 of them still haven't even gotten to play together. A whole lot. KD's had to miss different games.
I think they've only played 7 total games together.
Right, and then Kyrie just missed last night with lower back stiffness, and then the whole Kyrie, he took a mental health break.
Yeah.
So I mean, that could obviously be. Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Did you guys happen to see what Kyrie Irving wore into the game yesterday?
I did not.
Big tree walking stick. So I don't know if that was specifically like for his back or if it was like a fashion type statement, but he came in with like a Gandalf cane.
Interesting.
But still, I do think the Nets probably should be the favorites out of the East. They're currently 18 and 12, which has them second in the East, right behind Philly, who's 18 and 10. Then you got Milwaukee right behind them, 16 and 12. They've had some key wins since adding Harden. They've beat the Bucks, who obviously most people probably have them as somewhat of a contender in the East. They're not talked about as much this year as they have been in the past. That could just be because somewhat boredom with them and the fact that right now they're on a 4-game losing streak. The Bucks are. They're not playing extremely hot, but they've also beaten the Clippers. They've beat the Heat, which obviously that's not huge right now for the fact that the Heat are the 10th seed, but they also haven't had Jimmy Butler all year for the most of the year. So I still expect the Heat to at least be contending for probably like a top 5 to 6 seed in the East.
I do too, because I think they're like 8 and 5 when Butler plays, and they're like 3 and 9 when he doesn't.
Yeah, and then actually, I think the Heat could be one of the teams that ends up with Bradley Beal if they'll pull the trigger. I know you saw
they've got the package for him. They've got the picks and they've got the young players to go get Brad Beal if they want to. If the Wizards are willing to deal him.
I know that you liked my tweet the one day. It said, "If you're the Heat, do you give up Tyler Hero for Bradley Beal?" And that just seems like such a silly question.
I told you, it seems like I think people believe Tyler Hero is. I mean, he's a good young player, but I think people believe he's like prime Ray Allen, where this dude is just like the best player on the team, just like an untouchable asset for some reason. I mean, I'm telling you, it was that snarl that he did in the finals. And then the next game, he gets bulldozed by LeBron for a dunk and has like 4 points.
Yeah. I don't know why, if you're the Heat and you're Pat Riley, why you wouldn't want to average a guy that's – or
you absolutely trade Tyler Hero, Bradley
points per game. Yeah. But to go back with the Nets, so they've had some key wins, but they've also had some bad losses. Actually, one more key win they just won last night, the Nets did without KD and without Kyrie. Came back from like 24 points down against the Suns. James Harden took over late in the game, which I think that's going to be something that's big with the Nets this year. Harden was just saying the other day too about how they're kind of like with the crumbling in the playoffs and stuff like that. He was saying that people don't realize how exhausting it is to have to go out and put up 40 every night in the regular season than to try to have
hated
to do
that
that
he said
yourself.
that. The only reason why I hate that he said that was because he asked for everything that Houston ever gave him. He asked for that system because he wanted to play like that. That was all him. So I have no remorse for him at all for feeling tired when it came to the playoffs because he wanted everything and Houston bent over backwards for this guy.
Yeah, for sure. One thing with that, I feel like the 1 year they had the Warriors down 3-1, right? And Chris Paul
3-2. Yep.
3-2. Okay, yeah. And Chris Paul got hurt. So I mean, there's something, if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt that year, what happens? And then he also got the Dwight Howard experience early when Dwight Howard wasn't buying into the role and whatnot. So I mean, he has had some situations down there, which, like you said, he did ask for some of that stuff, but obviously some injuries that he can't prevent, played a role into that too. But back to the Nets, they've had some bad losses as well. They lost twice to the Cavs back-to-back games, and they gave up 147 and 125 points to Cleveland. I don't even know
149 to Washington.
Yeah, I got that on here too. Yeah, and that was when they got the steal late and threw it to Russ, and he got the three to put it overtime. Which I mean, Russ isn't a great three-point shooter, so I mean, yes, you just live with that. But I mean, 149 points to the Wizards is terrible, and then I don't think the Cavs put up 147 points when they had LeBron. So I don't know.
I don't think so either.
And then they also gave up 122 points to the Pistons recently. So that's kind of concerning.
And
like defense. Yeah. But I think ultimately the power will take over, and that should play a huge role into the success of the Nets. They were actually before we got on here, Stephen A. and Wilbon were talking, and LeBron was interviewed yesterday and asked if the Nets were the most scary offensive team he's ever seen. And LeBron answered the question with, have we forgot about KD, Steph, and Clay? So I wanted to ask you guys, is KD, Steph, and Clay a significantly better offensive threat than KD, Kyrie, and Harden?
I will say offensively, you could make an argument either way. But as a team, it's not even close because the Warriors that year probably had the best defense in the NBA to go along with that offense. So,
and you had everybody buying into the system of.
For sure, it had a lot to do with their play style as well. Because what the Nets do, like I said, they don't really run much offense. They just have three guys who are so skilled and can get their shot at any given moment. Where the Warriors were a lot of motion. There was a lot of screening. There were a lot of back cuts. They were relocating with Steph and Clay. I mean, Steph and Clay are the best relocating guards, shooters of all time. Even better than a Ray Allen or a Reggie Miller. Steph and Clay are just so gifted at doing that. And whereas when Harden doesn't have the ball, Harden just kind of stands off and does his own thing. And Kyrie kind of does the same thing too. That's what I just don't like about their offense when they get stagnant. And that's what worries me is when they can't get stops is it going to affect their offense? Because there's going to be teams in the playoffs that they're not going to be able to stop. Like, especially like a team like Embiid. I mean, with the Sixers and Embiid, I don't think they'll be able to stop Embiid at all if Embiid keeps playing the way that he's playing. And also, I still believe in the Bucks. I know the Bucks are on a 4-game schedule, but they haven't had Drew Holiday for those 4 games, and their defense has just been atrocious without Drew these past 4 games.
Yeah, I'm not a big believer in the Bucks. I'm with Dustin. I told you, I think on the last NBA podcast we did, that I expect the Nets to come out of the East, not win the whole thing, but to come out of the East. I think the Eastern Conference as a whole kind of fell off a cliff the past 2 years, and I think the 7 seed in the West right now could easily be the 3 seed in the East, and that's.
I think that only the 3 top seeds in the East are the only ones with winning records. I think everybody else is 500. Maybe they just got a game above 500.
Boston one
Boston
game up
is
at
4
14
seed. Yeah.
Okay, so they just won. I think they just beat the Nuggets last night, so they just got over 500. But exactly, you got to get my point where it's those top 3 teams in the East, I think, is Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and Brooklyn. And then you kind of got and I don't know. I mean, Boston, I think they still have a move to make, whether it's getting another big or another wing. And then Marcus Smart still coming back. You can't count out the Celtics for sure. And like Dustin, you mentioned the key earlier. They've been a team that has been affected by COVID the most. I mean, Jimmy Butler's been out hero. The only guy that's basically not been out is Bam. And I mean, Bam's just getting done basically just as much as he can. So the Heat, if they're fully healthy, they're definitely a team that they're not going to be scared in a playoff series against anybody, no matter who's on the other side of the court.
Oh yeah, and like I said earlier, I think the Heat will at least. I think they'll be active that trade deadline. They might not get a deal or something like that, but I think they'll at least make a move to try to get some extra score.
I think Drummond might end up in Boston. There's been talks about him going to Boston. Can you guys still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You guys can still hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Sorry. My headphones went off. I can't.
I saw the Drummond to Boston too, because they can fit Drummond in that Gordon Hayward trade exception, because they got a $28 million trade exception from that Gordon Hayward signing with Charlotte. And I think Drummond is a guy that definitely can help the Celtics. Now, I don't know. I think Andre Drummond's been a little bit overrated about how much he's actually going to help a real contender, because, I mean, he's been a lot of empty calories guy where he puts up good numbers, but he doesn't really affect winning very much. But, I mean, at least if he's a guy that could come in there and do 20 minutes a game, something, give you 15 and 10, that's valuable on the right team.
Yeah, and it cut up a little bit because my headphones died. But if he were to end up in Boston, I think he's a significant upgrade over Tristan Thompson. Tristan Thompson's a very good player, good at rebounding, but I mean, he's not going to put up the rebounding numbers that Drummond are putting up. I mean, he gets like 14 a game.
I think Drummond's led the league in rebounding like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. He's always at the top of the league.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I mean, granted, he's been in some, he's been in Detroit and Cleveland, so I mean, like you said, stat padding there, but I mean, you don't just walk your way into 14 rebounds. I mean,
I agree with that.
One more thing with the Nets, I think DeAndre Jordan's play will be significant as well with how much success they actually have. He needs to kind of be that defensive anchor that he was in LA when Lob City was a thing. If he can just show even some signs of that, catching some alley-oops, good screens, getting the shooters open, and just play some solid defense. I mean, I think that will be key in the Nets' success. I also put on here, and kind of like what I was talking about earlier, with if he can kind of embrace the Dwight Howard type role with that team. I mean, just know that you're not always going to be getting offensive looks. You're not always going to get to do all the pretty stuff, but I mean, setting screens and stuff like that. Like take on that Draymond type role. Draymond will brought 4 points, but he'll give you 13 assists, 10 rebounds, big plays or whatever like that. Draymond, it gives a lot of people the hustle play. I've always been a big fan of Draymond. A lot of people aren't big on Draymond because, I mean, he does, like I said, he doesn't fill up the stats with. You don't see him go out and put up 30 all the time. I mean, there's games where he'll shoot really well, but there's games where he, doesn't score at all. But I still feel like Draymond as a whole was, especially during those title runs for the Warriors, he was big in that. I mean, everyone talks about how
absolutely he was one of the most important players on their team.
Right. I mean, he's as a smaller guy that's running, for the big man, being, Draymond running center a lot, he also did a lot with controlling ball movement and getting the shooters in the right spot. I mean, finding Clay and Steph Curry. I mean, not that saying that DeAndre Jordan's going out there and get a bunch of assists, but if he can find that role that he needs to play for the Nets, that's going to be big. I thought it was funny when the Nets first got together. I think SportsCenter tweeted like, "This lineup is dangerous," and the fifth person they threw on there was Jeff Green. And it's like,
I know when you tweeted that, I thought that was hilarious, and I tweeted back at you. I was like, "Yeah, I can't wait for the articles that say they still have Landry Shamet coming off the bench."
Yeah, it's like we all saw, especially with watching Cleveland with those lineups. We saw nights where Jeff Green would give you 20 and look great, and
yes,
the next night 0 for 9, and it's like, what do you
let it be an important game, and that's the most Jeff Green thing to do is go 1 for 7 with 4 turnovers.
Exactly. So, I mean, Jeff Green is going to be a good, off the bench. They've got Joe, who is an elite shooter. He's got, I think, 3-point championship under his belt. So Joe Harris will be big in that. But I think the Nets should be the favorites. Like you said, you can't count out Milwaukee, can't count out Philly, assuming they stay healthy. They're another team that haven't gotten to play with their full lineup all the time either. Embiid's been out a few games with different injuries, resting different injuries. They were playing tonight. They actually have the game on it now. They're playing Houston, and I don't think it was announced super early, but Ben Simmons isn't playing tonight because of an illness.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so getting Ben Simmons and him together will obviously play a lot of role into that. And then I think the Philly is another team that probably will make a trade sometime. I don't know for what significant amount. There's been talks about potentially trading Ben Simmons. I don't know if that will happen or not. And if you do, what piece do you get for him? Do you get the pieces that fit with Embiid to still keep him a contender? What's your thoughts on Ben Simmons?
I love Ben Simmons. I think Ben Simmons he's been one of my favorite players since he came in the league. I love what he does. I think he's honestly probably the best on-ball defender that is currently in the league right now, just because of his size, his quickness, his intelligence. And honestly, he doesn't, I don't think he looks like it on TV, but he just seems like one of the strongest players in the league, because when they played the Lakers a couple weeks ago, I mean, it's tough to not move when LeBron drives into you. And I mean, he's a guy that doesn't really move that much when LeBron bullies him. And I think that's just full on impressive itself. I think Ben Simmons, and I'm really big on the Sixers this year, just by the way they look like they've totally bought in to what Doc Rivers is preaching there. Embiid, I think Embiid is just playing at a different level, just based off, I think he's pissed. I mean, it's been reported many times that he was super pissed that he didn't get the All-NBA nod last year over Rudy Gobert. And even, I think it was last night or the night before, the Sixers played him, and Embiid didn't play, but Simmons went off for 42 against the Jazz. And after the game, Ben Simmons said it was disrespectful to put a guy like Rudy Gobert on me. And so there's just obviously there's hate between the Sixers and Gobert because of the Embiid factor. But I think their roster fits because they got shooting with Seth Curry and Danny Green, and Tobias Harris has played a lot better this year. And I think they can be in the move for like a backup guard, because that guard, their bench is not the greatest with Tyrese Maxey and Thibault and Korkmaz. So I think they can be in the market for like a backup guard that can come in and spell Ben Simmons. But I really like the Sixers this year. I do.
Yeah, that's funny that you brought up the Rudy Gobert comment or what Ben Simmons said about Rudy Gobert. Because I actually had wrote down on here. So they lost against the Jazz the other night when he put up 40. But I was going to say, I mean, he made the comment, he felt it was disrespectful to put Rudy Gobert on him, which I see where he's coming from. But I mean, that's also a defensive player of the year.
Yeah, I mean, Rudy Gobert is one of the best defenders in the league. I mean, he's probably the best, absolutely the best rim protector there is in the league right now. Jay, I mean, how do you feel about Ben Simmons? I know we've kind of gone back and forth on the whole Embiid Simmons thing, and I don't think you're as high on the Sixers as I am this year.
I think they're the second best team in the East. I think I've told you before that I think they're going to give Brooklyn their biggest challenge, because they have length defensively. They have a center down low that Brooklyn has no answer for. I just don't think that they're going to be able to outscore Philly. or outscore Brooklyn. And I also have been shown time and time again that something always happens to Embiid come playoff time where he's not 100%. He's not there every game. So he'll put up a clunker every now and then. And I don't trust the Sixers. Right now they look great. We've seen them look great before. And then Embiid and Simmons decide they both want to be the star. So I don't know how it's going to work on playoff time. I like the roster that the 76ers have. I like the way they've been playing so far. Defensively, they're really good. They are going to create bad matchups against Brooklyn. But at the end of the day, I just think the 3 stars in Brooklyn are going to outscore the Sixers.
So in both of your guys' minds, you don't think there's any team that's coming out of the East that's not the Nets. So you would be shocked if there's not a team named the Nets in the finals from the East.
If all 3 stay healthy and play in the playoffs, yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say shocked, but I just feel like with as much offensive firepower that they have right now, offensively, I just don't see another team right now in the East keeping up with them scoring-wise. I mean, if they can put up 130, 140 a night, I mean, they can give up 120 if that's what happens. I mean, you just got to have to stop one of them from scoring. I mean, you got James Harden who can give you 30 any night, Kevin Durant give you 30, Kyrie 30. Harden, since joining the Nets, is averaging right now 24, 8, and 12. And Kyrie the other day which take it how you want. I don't know if, how Steve Nash feels about this, but Kyrie basically told James Harden, you're the point guard, I'll play shooting guard. Like, I don't know how well that sits with Steve Nash sitting there like, well, no, I'd really like to run the offense like this. And
I mean, he said over the summer he didn't even think they had a coach. Kyrie already earned a mind at his coach before he even played a second for him.
Right, and we've seen how
Kyrie was known to do that, and he did that in Cleveland. He did that in Boston. I mean, it's honestly kind of came to a surprise to I think a lot of people, including myself, because this is exactly what he didn't like playing with LeBron in Cleveland for. He didn't like being the second guy. He thought he was going to be the lead ball handler and should be. That's why he wanted his own team in Boston. So maybe he just realized that he's not good enough to do that all the time, and clearly Harden's better at that position than what Kyrie is. But I just think it's funny. That's another prime reason why I just am not fully bought into the Nets, because it's just also it's a mental aspect as well. I mean, we've seen teams countless times that are super talented but don't do anything because they can't deal with the pressure, or because it's one thing putting up all these numbers in February and January, March, but it's a different animal come May, April, June. And I mean, you saw what happened with the Clippers last night. Last year, the Clippers got all this hype. They never played together. They didn't take practice seriously. And then once they came to the playoffs, they ran into a different animal and just couldn't deal with it. They couldn't deal with the pressure. They couldn't deal the fact of the lack of chemistry and not playing together. I think I saw actually Chris Broussard say this today, where he thinks the Nets situation is very similar to what the Clippers did last year, where they were the team that everybody talked about. They were the new shiny puppy and everything. So I just have reservations about the Nets. I'm not ready to crown them Eastern Conference champions yet.
With the Nets, so I'm sure you obviously saw the little bit of shade that Kyrie tried to throw at the beginning of the season at LeBron. Is finally one of the players that he feels he can hit that big shot next to him. So with that situation, who do you want to see taking the last shot for Brooklyn?
You want KD?
Yeah, no doubt about it.
KD all day.
Any part of Harden?
No.
Okay, yeah, I feel that.
We saw Harden go like 1 for 17, 1 for 21 or something like that in the playoffs.
He's had multiple games where he's been 2 for 11 in playoff games, in closeout games. So I've seen him not play great. And like I said this a couple weeks ago, where KD had some letdowns for sure in the playoffs when he didn't have 4 Hall of Famers sitting next to him in Golden State when he was just with Russ. I mean, he had some duds in the playoffs before. I mean, I think even the Oklahoma City paper that loved him said something about how he was Mr. Unreliable or something that really hurt his feelings. So, I mean, it's happened contrary to what you would, just because of what the dominance that Golden State had those 3 years he was there. You don't really remember those things because it's kind of in the past and it's such a recency bias type thing where we just become prisoners of the moment. But I've seen KD have letdowns in the playoffs too, and I've definitely seen Kyrie do it too. I'm not saying that no superstars have these, but it's just they've got 3 guys that have not the greatest track record when it comes to those things.
The difference is Kyrie could go for 1 for 12 one night, and they'd still put up 135 points.
That's true, and they could.
So, yeah, that's the benefit, I guess, of having the 3, elite scorers. You can afford to have one of them be off the other one, night or whatever, as long as Kevin Durant's putting up numbers, or Harden, or vice versa, whoever's off that night, or you have the benefit of being able to rest one of them before the playoffs, get them a little bit healthy, or just some, extra rest just for that playoff run.
No doubt.
Do you guys think, this is kind of like a side question I've been thinking about, will the league make it all the way with allowing teams to go to, visiting cities? Do you think when it comes playoff time, they'll, kind of implement another bubble thing? I think it's going to be hard because all the players don't want to. But do you think they'll be able to make a whole playoff and finals and stuff outside of it?
Jay, I'll let you go first.
For sure I do. We just saw the NFL do it, and they travel 60 players and coaches to
True.
each city with them. You got equipment people, all these things. So we just watched the NFL do it. I don't think the NBA will have a problem with it.
Yeah,
I think they'll make it too. I do think it's a little bit different just because of the NFL. I know there's some similarities, but the difference is they play 3 games a week instead of just 1. And you also have such a big roster, and you had an extended practice squad this year for your NFL teams. Whereas if you had your backup center gone, you could just bring another guy off the practice squad, and it didn't really matter. But I mean, say this happens in the playoffs where, say, just for example, Kawhi goes out for the Clippers. I mean, and he's going to have to be out for 2 weeks. There's no way the Clippers win a playoff series without Kawhi. I mean, that's the big difference, is the fact of how long these guys are going to be out. Now, I don't know by the summer if the NBA is going to get all their players vaccinated, if they're going to be able to do that. Who knows? But 99% of me says that they do not have a bubble, again, because no, the players don't want it. They at least want to be able to go home and sleep in their bed and see their family.
And it's still months away. So the
COVID the NBA hasn't even released the second half of their schedule because they have to make up all these games that have been postponed. They don't even they only have like 52 games scheduled for each team so far.
I actually got a notification from ESPN earlier that was saying that the NBA wants to try to start backing off some of their restrictions and stuff like that for the players. And they were saying in order to be able to do that, that might entice more of the league to want to get league-wide vaccinations for all the players and coaches and everything, which I'm sure people out there that, don't follow sports, don't like sports, that think that that's not right, that, that's just another privilege that these athletes get. They already get a ton of money and they get a bunch of perks and stuff like that. And I can see people being upset that they get to jump to the front of the line for something like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it is essentially a huge business, and that generates a lot of money to be able to keep those players out there.
For sure.
I mean, bringing up, just to take it to college real quick, I saw the NCAA lost like $600 million last year by not being able to have lost like $600 million last year by not being able to have March Madness. So obviously the NCAA wants to be able to have March Madness. That's why they're questioning if they should do conference play-in games and stuff like that.
And as much as, like you said, as much as just like the normal, just like us, I mean, obviously we're just people that don't work in sports and aren't professional athletes. We just work normal 9 to 5s and whatever. But I mean, that has a huge impact on the economy, just not having this revenue from sports. I mean, because these guys, this whole league just funds a lot of people. I mean, employs a ton of people throughout the country, just not the athletes. I mean, the people in the arenas, the team, the people that sell the merchandise for these teams. Even you got to think about how much that affects everybody.
Oh yeah, when I used to work for Levy Restaurants, the catering concessions provider for all the Purdue athletics, Levy did more than just collegiate athletics. They did pro arenas. They, anywhere that they had the contract for. And when everything shut down initially from COVID, a lot of people that I worked with at different locations, I had the opportunity to go out to California and work a tennis tournament, work the Indy 500, stuff like that. A lot of people that I worked with were furloughed and actually even fully let go because of COVID. I mean, not allowing fans into the arenas is affecting, like you said, more than just, the athletes and stuff like that. I mean, Purdue this year won a whole football season without being able to sell out 50,000 fans for 7 home games. I mean, that's huge for, like you said, merchandise, concessions, anything like that. Just in general, I mean, you've gone to a pro game or even a non-pro game. I mean, people that live nearby, they make some money by giving away their yard for parking. I mean, that's
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, it's something that people probably don't. I mean, not that, oh wow, they didn't get to sell $20 parking in their front yard.
Yeah, exactly. Poor them, but still, I mean, that's how some people make their livelihood. Yeah. I mean, that's how people feed their family.
Yeah, I mean, there was plenty of times where right across the street from Mackey Arena, you got people putting their yard up and they can put 10 cars there, $20 a car. That's $200 for one day. And if there's 7 home games, I mean, that's 200 times 7 home games. It's a good amount of money for, some extra spending money or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, the NBA is going to try to do everything they can. I don't think they'll end up in a bubble either. Like I said, you've got, especially with LeBron speaking out against it. I mean, everyone says that the league falls with what LeBron says. They said, LeBron said, we're going to finish the season. So we're finishing the season.
Giannis said that the other day. He said, you got to follow the big dog, talking about the All-Star game, because LeBron said he has no desire to play in the All-Star game. He said, my energy is not going to be there. And Giannis goes, look, you got to follow the big guy. He said, look, I don't want to play in it either. He was like, I have no energy for it. And Kawhi said something very similar to where they don't want to play the All-Star game because it's just the NBA is doing it to make some more money. But the players clearly do not want this All-Star game. So it might be one of the worst All-Star games in history.
Right. And I actually saw that the NBA said that they want to donate any profit basically that they make from the All-Star game to like the city of Atlanta to try to help first responders and stuff like that, try to help, out with the economy there, which that's obviously big. But I mean, there's been so much talks in the past about how the All-Star game, the level of competitiveness has been, up until maybe last year when they switched it up a little bit and let the players pick the teams. And then they did the whole thing last year with the first team to like 24 points or whatever after they hit a certain mark to honor Kobe. The competitiveness went up a little bit last year. But yeah, like you said, with the middle of a COVID year, I'm interested to see I think it'll stay on because the NBA is pushing a lot for it now. They're trying to even get the dunk contest to be at halftime of the All-Star game.
Yeah, they said they're having the 3-point dunk and the skills challenge. They're for sure having them. Yeah.
I don't know about that. Obviously, I mean, you're going to have some players that are going to make the All-Star team that could also be in the dunk contest that it's always going to back out of the dunk contest.
Yeah.
We all play a half of All-Star game and then run out there and dunk for 20 minutes.
Or go shooting the 3-point shootout or compete in the skills challenge or what. But yeah, I mean, especially in a shortened season like what they did. I mean, the Lakers and the Heat had 70 days off before the season started. All those teams that, I mean, some people went like 9 months without playing because they didn't get invited to the bubble, but other teams only went like 4 months without playing. So that's also another reason to think these players just want a little bit of extended rest since the NBA forced upon their hand and was like, hey, we got to get this season going already because we want the next season to be normal.
Yeah, exactly. Which obviously, I mean, if they would try to delay this season too much, eventually, where do you draw that line? So you're not just
exactly.
I mean, eventually, you got to try to get it back onto schedule where it should.
I'm actually surprised we haven't seen more injuries based off of the turnaround that a lot of these teams have had, and really, you haven't seen much guys resting as much as I thought that there would be.
Yeah, we saw with the NFL, I think the no OTAs and stuff like that played a huge role early in the season. Obviously, you had a lot of star players go down. You had Saquon go down early.
It killed teams in the beginning. I mean, I just remember one pod we did, Jay. I think we listed off like 30 like well-known guys that were out for extended periods of time, if not the whole season.
What's your guys' thoughts? I know we're talking basketball, but I mean, just since we're talking the football and stuff like that, there's been different, like the NFL Players Association. They're trying to fight for no OTAs moving forward. Good idea or bad idea?
Bad idea.
I think it's a bad idea too.
I agree. Like we said, I think you see a lot more major injuries without that. I mean,
I can see like the guys that have been in the league for like 8 years who don't care, and if they've been on the same team for a really long time. But I think it's really valuable to younger players, to players that switch teams, and even if you change head coaches, because say you're a guy on the team for 8 years, but your coach comes in and you're learning a whole new system. I think it's very valuable to learn that system and just get a jump start on anything, because obviously I think you've seen that coaching and practice and being able to be with your team matters a lot. It does more than what I think has been advertised, for sure.
Definitely.
You want to get I'm personally interested to see how both of you feel about the Utah Jazz. Are they for real? Are they contenders? How do you feel about the team?
What do you think, Jay? You give us your thoughts first, and then we'll go.
Throwing a curveball at me. Okay. I actually think
you brought him up.
I think they're going to compete with the Lakers in the West, even with a healthy AD. They're the deepest team in the league to me. They're a top 5 offense, a top 3 defense in the league. Even with Conley, hadn't he been out recently?
I think he's missed the last 3 or 4 games. Yeah.
Even without him, dude, they got scoring and defense everywhere. Donovan Mitchell, he's a clutch player. Come playoff time, I think he's proven that. You got Gobert down low. You got Bogdanovich. You got a dude that I didn't even know who he was until this year.
Royce O'Neal.
3 and
he's
D
been
type
balling
of guy.
this year.
Yeah,
I have my fantasy team.
Jordan Clarkson probably
Hell yeah.
6th man of the year. Like they have people all over the place, and I think
he just dropped 40 last night against the Sixers. It was.
I think it's a positive that they don't have a big 3 or a big 2, because I don't really consider Donovan Mitchell and Gobert like a big 2. I think they have a Donovan Mitchell, and then they got 5 different guys that can give you 25 on a given night randomly. And that's scary when you're playing them defensively, because you're like, I don't know who to guard tonight. Like, I don't know where to expend our extra energy guarding this, doubling this player, because then you got a guy over here like Bogdanovich could nail 6 straight 3-pointers from the corner. So it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do defensively. And on top of that, it's not like you only don't know what to do defensively to stop them. They're going to stop you because they're great defensively. So it's like, they're just a really good team. Right now they're sitting at the number 1 seed in the West. I think they're a for real contender.
What have they won? 17 of 18?
Yes.
I think. Yeah. Well, and I think when the Celtics just played them a couple weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was pretty recently. Brad Stevens compared them to the 2014 Spurs that ran circles.
There's a lot of similarities
around the Heat in that finals, because they just the way they share the ball, the way because obviously that year Kawhi hadn't really ascended into a top player. I mean, other than what Twitter and people will make you believe now that it happened, Kawhi was not what he was back then in 2014. Anyways, and Tim Duncan was like 39. Parker was old. Ginobili was old. They had pops, and they were very well coached, and they were deep, and they moved the ball, and they played good good offense, defense. That's kind of what the Jazz remind me of. And I told you, I think a week or so ago, Jay, that I really thought that they were the second best team in the West behind the Lakers. I really think they're the team that's going to challenge the Lakers to. And another thing that I don't know if I heard somebody say this or saw it on Twitter or something, but the Jazz, I think, realized how valuable that 1 seed is, not because of home court, because they don't know about the fans, but because if the Lakers and the Clippers are at 2 and 3, one of them's knocking each other out in the second round of the playoffs, and that just eliminates the Jazz from having to play both, because those are definitely the number. I think the Lakers are the first best team, and then I think the Clippers are the third best team behind the Jazz. But hey, I mean, it's 2 of the 3 best teams, and if they knock each other out, that's 1 less team you got to play.
Yeah. You mentioned the record. This is for all the sports betting fans out there. The Jazz are 18-2 against the spread in the last 20. That's
impressive.
Big. If you watch this or see this before tonight's game, they play the Clippers tonight, and they're favored -3.5, and that's with no Conley and no Paul George playing.
I think Kawhi just got ruled out for that game too.
I had on here that he was questionable. I saw he was questionable earlier. I wasn't sure if that had been announced yet.
Yep, I just got an alert that he is out.
Okay, so there you go. I think the Jazz cover tonight then, -3.5. If the line's probably moved a little bit, but I think the Jazz success, a lot of it plays a role into the health of the Clippers and the Lakers. Obviously, if no AD, that really takes the Lakers out of, like you said, contention most likely, which I think the Lakers will give them, probably the best run. Clippers, same thing. Or I mean, even if they're healthy and the Clippers play like they played last year, I mean, obviously, then that won't be too much of an issue.
Paul George is side of the backboard, and
exactly. And you got Patrick Beverley barking and getting 3 points. I actually here before. I was talking to my buddy about this the other day, and I said that the Jazz kind of reminded me of the Raptors when LeBron was still in the East. Especially the DeMar DeRozan and the Lowry Raptors. I think those Raptors teams were probably good enough that if LeBron wasn't there in the East, that they probably could have finals run before, LeBron went west and then they added Kawhi. I think the Raptors had a chance of winning a title if LeBron wasn't, there and you had to go against, in my opinion, probably your opinion, the GOAT.
The GOAT.
But then I also saw on Twitter some people were kind of referring to them as the 2015 Atlanta Hawks when they led the East.
Yeah.
I think
they're better than the Hawks. Yeah. I get your point, though. Keep going.
Yeah. But yeah, so I just think that ultimately, assuming they run into a healthy Lakers team, Gobert's, one of the potential defensive player of the years. I don't think he can really handle Anthony Davis. And then I think Anthony Davis can guard him probably better than Gobert will guard him. Gobert only averages like 14 points anyways, which still solid. I think I had on here that he's averaging the most points he's had in his career so far. But I think that a lot of that also depends on which Jordan Clarkson you get. Right now you got 6th man of the year Jordan Clarkson. We saw with the Cavs different times.
I saw the worst version of Jordan Clarkson. I did. Yeah. I saw front and center.
Yeah, so it really that depends a lot. If he can play 6th man of the year basketball all year, then yeah, Jordan Clarkson will be key in that. Conley, his health obviously will play a big role into that. He's not the Conley that we saw with Memphis, but he's still a very solid backup point guard, or take some of the stress off of Donovan Mitchell having to score a lot. Currently, also, kind of going back to not to be talking about betting too much, but Vegas still only has the Jazz as the 6th favorite right now to win the title at plus 400. The top 5 right now is Lakers, Nets, Clippers, Bucks, and 76ers. So they've got 2 other teams out of West right now ahead of them, and then they've got 3 Eastern teams. The Jazz were right behind that. So Vegas isn't super believers yet in the Jazz. Again, I think a lot of it's going to depend on the health of the Lakers and the Clippers. If they run into either one of those teams fully healthy, if AD's injury isn't as bad as everyone thinks, if it can just really be a calf strain and he's back in a couple, weeks, or even if they hold him off for a little bit longer, I think that will be huge on that. Also, I had on here, can Gobert play elite on both ends all year? He's averaging the most points per game right now of his career. He's averaging 14 points a game, 13 rebounds, and 3 blocks on 64% shooting, which is top 5 in the NBA right now. His points are down a little bit right now. The past 2 years, he had them up a little bit, but his rebounds and blocks are both up. But for a career, he's averaging 12, 11, and 2, so he's got all that up. He's up 2 points, 2 rebounds, and a block. And then something I found interesting when I was looking at his stats today, he has not shot 1 3 in his career. So he has not transitioned into the new age.
I did not know that, actually.
Neither did I. I was looking at it, I was like, okay, he hasn't shot a 3 today.
I figured he'd just at least chuck one up at the end of a game or something.
Yeah.
Like Shaq used to do.
Right. So, it shows that he's sticking to the throwback big man role. He's not trying to expand the game much.
For sure, and I think he also had a lot to do with when him and Mitchell got into it last year, and there was all the reporting of them beefing because Gobert wanted more post-ups and thought he was this offensive threat, and that's just not his game. So I think he's kind of dialed that back and is just going to be – he's a rim runner. He's going to attack offensive rebounds, and he's just going to pick his spots, really, not really trying to score and just be the best defender he can. And you mentioned the AD thing. Last year when the Lakers and the Jazz played, you saw how personally Anthony Davis took it because he thinks he's much better than Gobert. In the bubble, he dropped 40 on him when they played the Jazz. Earlier in this, he just had some of his best games against the Jazz. Anthony Davis did. So, like I said, I'm 100%. If all is healthy in the Lakers, I'm taking them over anybody in the league right now. But hey, you catch the Lakers without their top guy. The Jazz, because I think they're better than the Clippers. I really do. I'm not that sold on the Clippers this year. I wasn't sold last year, but that's neither here nor there.
I actually think the Clippers.
Everyone kind of had a personal vendetta against Gobert after everyone kind of blamed him for the season getting shut down. I think a lot of players kind of weren't feeling Gobert. He wasn't taking the COVID situation extremely, serious right away. Obviously, I don't think
reporters' microphones and shit.
I don't think it's really fair to say that he shut the league down.
Obviously, no, we saw what happened with every sport. It was going that way.
Yeah, it just so happened that he did that and then tested positive for COVID, and they had to delay that Thunder and Jazz game.
It was wild. I remember that was crazy. I was just watching. I was getting ready to watch that game, and just weird. The Pelicans and Kings game. Strange, very strange.
I am happy to see Gobert has been balling quite a bit this year, kind of making Shaq look a little silly. Shaq has been kind of crucial
he's been crucial. He was crucial. Donovan Mitchell as well when he on live TV he just told Donovan Mitchell he wasn't a superstar.
And Donovan Mitchell
just goes, "I."
Yeah, sure, okay, Shaq, be a hater. Which it's odd to see that because a lot of people probably have a high amount of respect for Shaq, especially players, big man. I'm sure Gobert probably watched Shaq highlights growing up or whatnot.
Sure.
So to hear maybe one of your idols or somebody a role model or something like that kind of throw shade for really no reason seemed kind of odd to me. So it is nice to see Gobert play well and not let that affect his game too much. Obviously, the Jazz are playing really well right now. It'll be interesting to see if they can hold it up. And if they are a contender or a pretender.
I don't know. I kind of don't like that argument of he's just on there throwing shade for no reason because Shaq has transformed into an analyst now, and that's what you're asking him to do is analyze what he sees and analyze the players he watches and what he thinks of their game. I don't think Shaq's ever just been disrespectful to people and I think you're trash. I think this guy's.
I think he has it. I think he has at times because I think there's a way to be critical without just flat out being a dick.
Maybe. Yeah. I just think everybody looks at Shaq or Charles Barkley or the guys that have transferred over into the analyst role and just expect them to talk up every player. So and to me, that's fake. Tell me what you think. If you think Rudy Gobert needs to step his game up on the offensive side, say it. And then if Rudy Gobert has a problem with that, do something about it. Go figure out how to be better on offense or just brush it off because it doesn't affect you and the player you are. So I don't like when former players get criticized for speaking what they believe is the truth. Now, sometimes you hear what they say and you're like, okay, you're just clearly saying this just to get a click or get a listen or get your name out there more. But a lot of I personally, we're talking about Shaq. I don't feel like he does that. I feel like Shaq's got so much publicity. Everyone knows who Shaq is. He doesn't need more people's eyes on him. He's just.
And the thing about that is obviously, and Shaq said it just not that long ago, where he said, "Look, I earned to be able to talk like this. I'm one of the greatest players of all time." He was like, "There's only a select few of players that have ever did what I did when I played." And he said, "Currently, LeBron and Steph are the only players that are in my class of what they've done currently." Compared to what I did in my career. But like I said, I just think there's a way to be critical without just completely, especially just in the setting that he did that into Donovan Mitchell, where he did it on live TV in the middle of a game or right after a big win, just saying what he said to him. If you feel that, I don't know, I'm sure he could easily reach out to Donovan Mitchell and tell him that and just in a private setting. I just don't like the way he did it. And I don't like the way that some of these older guys, it's just because I don't know if there's jealousy from the old players because the way that the players get paid now and the way they're talked about and kind of babied. I don't really know I think there's just a jealousy thing from the old players to the current stars. I do.
Yeah, I'm sure Shaq thinks he deserved a $200 million contract in his career.
For sure.
He did, but
Nicholas Batum probably made more money than Shaq did and then Charles Barkley did in his entire career. Yeah. Nicholas Batum can't even hold Chuck's jockstrap.
Right. And you see, these players get overpaid that shouldn't get paid. But in the same, token, that the league, these teams have to pay some of these players more than they deserve.
Absolutely. And it's just the fact that they grew up in this era. It's no fault to them that they just happen to be in the league at the time where that's the going rate for a lot of players. It's the same thing in every sport. It's just it's the way the world works.
And the old saying is you're worth what someone's willing to pay you. So if
there you go.
Willing to pay you that much money, that's what you're worth to somebody.
Well, what is he supposed to say? No.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Please don't pay me a lot of money. I'd prefer just give me 40.
It's rare that a lot of these guys turn down big contracts to go somewhere else. and play for less money. I mean, a lot of these guys, I mean, they all say they want to win, but I don't think that's true for everybody. A lot of people like their money.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you know that you can get $200 million to help your family and your family's family and the next generation after that, I don't think it's too hard to turn down that type of money. I
mean, they're just like, that's like just generational wealth that these players are going to be able to do to set up future family just for forever. So I don't blame them. You can't blame them.
So we've talked about the 4 main topics that you had texted about. I kind of did this on my own, so I mean, don't feel like you need to stress over too much.
Love it.
I'm curious, what are your both of you guys, early award winners? Like MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year. I did MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, 6th Man, Most Improved, Coach of the Year, and GM.
Well, let's hear
you don't have to do all that because, I mean, I looked into it a little bit more earlier, so I mean, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but could you guys got at least for a few of the major awards?
I think right now LeBron's the MVP, and I think I think he's here and Embiid is here. I think Embiid's got a lot to climb, but I think it's clear in a way LeBron right now. I really don't think there's much of an argument for that award. I don't.
But I think Embiid has a case for Defensive Player of the Year.
You got Embiid as Defensive Player of the Year?
He has a case.
I'd say Gobert.
I mean, Gobert's averaging 3 blocks on the best team.
I think even on the Sixers, I think Ben Simmons has a better argument for Defensive Player of the Year because I think he's their best defender.
So then
positions.
We're definitely going to differ then. So, okay, I had LeBron as MVP. For my Defensive Player of the Year, I had Miles Turner. He's leading the league in blocks right now.
I don't hate that.
He's averaging 3.5 blocks a game, which leads the league, averaging 6 defensive rebounds and a steal. I mean, he just doesn't get as much TV coverage, obviously.
He doesn't get the publicity that any of these teams do. And the record and does it really equate to much winning is the argument for Miles Turner because the Pacers are like 13 and 14 or 14 and 14 or something like that. So that would be the argument against Miles Turner.
Who's your Rookie of the Year, Dustin?
I got LaMelo now.
LaMelo.
He's averaging 15, 6, and 6.
And I think since he's been starting, which is the last 6 or 7 games, I think he's averaging over 20 in the starting role. I think it's clearly LaMelo. I think it's LaMelo's award to lose. But I think Tyrese Halliburton is kind of right on his butt with the Kings because he's played well for the Kings, and he's just a good player.
Yeah, Anthony Edwards is playing really well too right now.
Edwards is again. I think the argument's going to be the winning thing. James Wiseman, he just got hurt and broke his hand, so I think he's going to kind of be out of the ring a little bit for that. But LaMelo's flashy. He's talked about a lot, and the Hornets are actually a lot better than a lot of people think. They're have played this year. Definitely overachieved, I think.
And a large portion is because of him.
We all talked about this kind of already when we talked about the Jazz. Are we all in agreement? Currently right now, Jordan Clarkson's 6th Man of the Year?
Yep.
For sure.
I think
he's averaging 18, 4, and 2 on 46% shooting from the field and 39% from 3. So
I think he's currently the leader for that. I think probably behind him close would be Chris Boucher from the Raptors. So I think he's played really well. So I think he's in that running, but right now it's Clarkson that's leading it for me.
Who you guys got as your most improved player?
That's tough. I could see Jeremy Grant or Christian Wood. I think those are the 2 guys that it's between because Jeremy Grant, I mean, he took that money and ran with it in Detroit, and he wanted a bigger role offensively for himself. And same thing kind of with Christian Wood. I mean, and the Pistons just let him walk. I mean, depending on how many games he misses with that ankle turn, but I think he was averaging like 23 and 11. Christian Wood was. So he's just going to miss a lot of time. So it's between him or Jeremy Grant. I don't know at this moment right now who I would say, but it's definitely those 2 guys.
What about Julius Randle leading the Knicks?
That's who I have.
He's up there. I can't argue with that. I think he just dropped 44 the other night. I mean, he's got the Knicks as like the 6th seed in the East, and he's been balling. It's not a bad person. Pretty good.
He's averaging 23, 11, and 6 this year on 48% shooting and 41 from 3. And the Knicks currently the 6th seed. And the last time we saw the Knicks in the playoffs was what, 2012, 2013 Melo?
I think so, yeah.
When they were like the 1 or 2 seed behind the Heat.
Yep, and lost to the Pacers in the second round.
So he's been balling. So yeah, I had him on my most improved player. Coach of the year, I've got Quinn Snyder. Who do you guys got?
Easily Quinn Snyder. Yep.
I think
he could have won it a couple times, but this year so far, what the Jazz are doing, it's just,
I think how he handled, I mean, the Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert situation could have been way worse.
For sure.
Especially, I mean, like we just talked about, I mean, the league kind of joked that Gobert got the season canceled, which obviously was super unfair. But Donovan Mitchell was really upset when all that happened. I'm pretty sure Donovan Mitchell got COVID from Gobert.
Yes, he did.
So, I mean, that could have been a relationship that really could have faltered. And, you know, if you can't work that out, then you lose either – most likely you probably lose Gobert in that situation, which, I mean, Donovan Mitchell is the better player to have there. But, I mean, giving up a defensive player of the year still is big time. And, I mean, just to be able to fight through that, have your team right now number one, and that's even with, you know, Anthony Davis just now got hurt. So it's not like he's been hurt for a month and the Jazz went on a crazy run. The Jazz are playing, you know, probably some of the
as
best
good
basketball
as anybody.
Yeah. Then for the GM of the year, I got our boy Rob Pelinka.
I think it's got to be him just by what he did this offseason, who he brought in, the trade. I mean, he stole Schroeder from the Thunder because giving up Danny Green and that pick that was never going to play on the roster for the Lakers, and then signing Harrell away from the Clippers and getting Wesley Matthews and Marc Gasol. So I just think he's the guy, because there wasn't really that one big trade that everybody just fell in love with, because you had the Wall for Westbrook deal, but I mean, has that really worked out for either team?
Yeah,
the Nets. I mean, the Nets just basically gutted their entire roster for Harden, and the KD and Kyrie thing was last year, so it's not like you can take that into effect this year. So I think it's Rob.
I think the 76ers GM has a case. He went out and brought in, he went out and brought in Doc Rivers. He brought in the shooters that you mentioned earlier, and Danny Green, and I'm blanking on the other shooter they brought in.
Seth
Curry.
And
he was able to just dump Al Horford's contract. That was a feat to itself.
Contract. So
it was terrible.
The 76ers GM Daryl has a legitimate argument.
I think that's pretty good. Sure. I don't hate that.
I'm just excited to see. A couple years ago, I'm sure you saw it on Twitter, people were making it seem like Pelinka was in way over his head. I mean, Magic Johnson resigned. They were saying he didn't understand how cap space worked, and they weren't going to be able to get Anthony Davis. And they got rid of Zubac and this and that. It's like, okay, well, they got rid of Zubac and the pieces they got rid of, and they brought in Anthony Davis and won a title. Hey, I think that worked out pretty well. And then, as you just mentioned, you stole Montrezl Harrell from your next door neighbor. Yeah, exactly. From the people playing in the same building, you stole the sixth man of the year from them, and then got the second runner-up for sixth man of the year in Schroeder.
For a guy in Danny Green who didn't perform well in the playoffs at all, and you were still able to win the title in spite of his efforts. So, and then now you got a guy who is an elite ball handler and can score with the best. And he was a pretty good defender, I think. I mean, he's undersized, but he's a pest defensively.
And another couple moves he made went out and took a chance on Rondo, who a lot of teams didn't want. Yep. And then he also went out and got Avery Bradley, who was very critical up until the playoffs were in the bubble where he decided to opt out. He would have been.
It's clear that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's just
anybody that ever. I just didn't understand anybody who ever criticized the Anthony Davis trade. When you get the superstar in the deal, you win the deal.
And there was people
as the head coach that we have been saying was underrated.
Vogel,
So
there was people saying that they gave up way too much for Anthony Davis, but you do the trade again tomorrow, you give up the same pieces.
In the picks that you gave up aren't even going to equate to any good picks. They're going to be bottom of the first round type picks that were never going to play on the roster with LeBron and AD. I mean, they were going to be picks they traded away at future deadlines or something. So
you got Lonzo
won a title,
got rid of the LeVar headache.
I mean, just to go off, nobody criticized the Drew Holiday deal. Drew Holiday got traded for just as many picks as Anthony Davis did. Drew Holiday's not the same player that AD is. So
the Nets just got rid of Jared Allen and didn't get – I mean, they got Harden, but they didn't get anything for Jared Allen. They just gave him to Cleveland.
Yes, they did because, that's how they had to make the deal work because Houston needed their picks. Yep. So, yeah.
You got anything else?
All right, well, I mean, this was fun, man.
Yeah.
Well, we bring you back here. You bring the heat during the NBA season.
For sure.
Perfect. I like to hear.
I like when you brought he was prepared. He had his own thing for us at the end. That's the way to do it.
That was nice. It was a nice switch up because usually I don't get questions that I'm not ready for.
Yeah. I didn't want to cut
you guys
too off guard, but I figured I'd throw you guys a little bit of a curveball.
I love it.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, man, like I said, thanks for joining us. It was fun, and we'll have to bring you back on again for sure.
Definitely. Anytime you guys want me to, I'm always down. Down to talk some sports any day.
All right.
Yeah. Well, as we always say, until next time.